Hello, hello, hello. Hopefully, we are actually live this time. This is take two for us today. We are having technical issues. Thank you so much for joining us this Sunday. I am Chris. Joining me, as always, are my beautiful co-hosts, Steph, Kat, and Katie. We're going to come to you today on the Muses with a very, very important topic for the times that we're dealing with. With COVID, with isolation, we've got a little bit of somebody mute themselves.
That was me, sorry.
So the world today feels like it's spinning. And a consequence of that is the human emotion, that fear, that loneliness, that isolation is really ramping up. And we're starting to feel more and more hopeless. And with that comes the ever-present human experience of feeling suicidal, of feeling like you don't have to be in pain anymore. Now, the unfortunate thing is we don't talk about this to the point where we can help people before committing suicide. Suicide itself has become less of a taboo than people who are suicidal. We're more willing to talk about people who have committed suicide and mourn for those who have passed than help those who are here and suffering. And that's a tragedy that we as humans have the power to stop. And we have the power to stop it by talking about it, by having conversations like this, and by sharing our experiences. So today we're going to be bringing this all to light. Please comment, please share your experiences, please tell us where you're coming in from. This is a topic that needs to be shared, not just for Americans, not for just the military, for the world, because we are in this together and we have the power to change this one person at a time. So ladies, hard subject to jump into. Katie, you've been very open about your experience with it. How has and why has suicide become such a taboo that we're unwilling to talk about it to the detriment of people's lives?
Yeah, this is such a triggering topic for me because I know most of you that have followed me on my journey know that my son really struggled with mental illness and tried to commit suicide probably 3 or 4 times. So yeah, very, very near and dear to my heart. And, there's a million reasons, why it's gotten to be such a crisis epidemic. Chris and I were just talking about, I think they said 2021, 2020 and 2021, suicide rates have been up 300%. That is unbelievable. Like you can't even imagine what that actually plays out and how many lives that actually touches, because everybody that does commit suicide ends up affecting, so many people that are left behind. It takes me back to this moment where my son had tried to overdose on medication and drugs, and I called 911, and the cops were, everybody was there, and I honestly didn't know, if he was gonna start convulsing, and like when things would hit. And he had actually tried to drink some bleach, which is really, really bad. And we were in the ambulance, and we were going to the hospital. And this is the thing. Everybody now plays their lives out on social media. Mm-hmm. And that has become such a comparison factor. And it's a beautiful thing because it brings us together as a global, community. But at the same time, there's this constant comparison that nobody really wants to talk about, because all we post is how perfect our life is and how beautiful we look in our selfie. And, and so I'll just never forget that my son had actually posted on social media what he had done. And I was absolutely like, I couldn't even fathom, because I'm in a whole different generation, why you would do that. And why, while we were like, getting, in the ambulance and going to the hospital, his phone the entire time just kept ding, 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 constantly, just people like that had seen his post and, trying to reach out. And I remember just saying, Parker, look at all these people that care about you. Like, why do you not like see the love that surrounds you? And he just had this painful look in his eyes. And he just said, I just feel so alone, just so utterly alone. And it just was this weird, like tangible, experience of even, somebody can say, oh, that person, why would they do something like that? They seem to have it all. You hear about these people that, were successful and, in the prime of their lives and this and that. But that to me just said it all, when even with all of the people, around him and trying to reach out to him, he was in so much pain that he had isolated himself to such an extent he just couldn't even feel that. And one more thing I wanted to add, along the way, I had gone to a talk. It was a community talk, and there was like a principal of a school there. There was I don't know, some medical, professionals there, and it ended up being a talk about suicide. And for two things, obviously I tend to be focused a little more on the younger generation because of my experience with my son. But the principal got up and he said, it's funny. He said, every generation, people always say, oh, my generation had it so much harder. We had to walk uphill both ways, to school in the rain, and, kids have it so easy today. He said, but I want to tell you, this generation, this younger generation that's coming up today, they truly do have it harder. This is the first generation that really, it can be said, they will have it harder than their parents. Their life expectancy is actually less for the first time ever, that kids will live less than their parents, because there's just, things have changed. Everything's global. There's so much competition. And the other thing that he said that struck me was, when people feel suicidal, when they commit suicide, it's not because they just want to end it all. I mean, maybe for some, right? It's not like they're going into it from that place. They feel so backed into a corner of pain and torment. It's like having a terminal illness that they're not doing it necessarily to end it all. They're doing it because they just want the pain. They just don't see any other option for ending the torment that they're in. And that really helped me understand, like it differently, to try to kind of see inside their space, whoever's going through trauma on this level. So I just wanted to share that in case it helps anybody else out there. It's so interesting too that we're talking about this today, because I was meeting with a friend this week that I hadn't seen in a while, because my energy levels haven't been, the way that they were. I'm still, having a tough time with the grieving process. But we got together and we were going for a walk, and she just started crying, and she just said, I can't go on. And she has it all, you guys, everything you can imagine. And I'm looking and I'm like, what? And she just said, is this all there is? Is this it? Is this like this is it? This is my life. Like, what, we all come and we think we're going to, have these dreams and, things are going to happen. And it just never seems to go exactly how we think, in our mind. Again, that comparison thing. And it was just such this weird, again, moment, because I'm like, oh my God, I'm in that same place a lot, And so I don't know, if I have the energy, I don't know what to say. This is what we do when somebody says, I really am feeling like ending it all. We just panic, and I was like, this is so interesting, because me, of all people, being so close, to this topic and this, whatever you want to call it, energy, I get it, what you're saying, Chris, because I did. I was like, what do I say? How do I make it better? Because I think we struggle for the words to make it better because it touches this point in us that we've all been to, or a lot of us have. And we didn't know how to help ourselves. And so then we kind of are like, what do we say? All I could think to do was, instead of talking, was to just go over and touch her and hug her and just let her know that she's not alone. Because I kept, like, every time I tried to say something, it just was like, that sounds, you know what I mean? That's like trivial, you know? So yeah, a very challenging thing to talk about. Kat, I think you're muted. That never happens. You're never quiet.
Who?
You.
Oh, I muted myself because my dog was making some noise.
Oh, okay.
I'm not quiet.
What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Oh gosh, that's a lot. There's like a lot to address there. Thank you for sharing, first of all. I know that's not always easy. And where I keep going is just to whether somebody is thinking about ending their life or somebody's life is being ended by something else, or somebody's having a family or situational change in their life. I think these are all topics for different people that are hard to discuss, or nobody knows what to say, or oftentimes people don't know what to say, would be a more accurate statement. And I think that the touch, literally touching somebody, being willing to be with them, is huge. I think also sometimes just telling somebody, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
I feel your pain. And I don't know what to say. Gosh, I'm here with you. I'm here for you. I think oftentimes we try to fix things for people. What can I say that's going to fix this for you? Which is part of the reason that we're like, I don't know what to say. Our brain is going 100 miles an hour searching. What are all the things that I have in my data bank that I could say to you to fix this? And there isn't an answer. And I think if we instead choose to show up to ask the tough questions, I think sometimes the things, honestly, that no one would dare say are the best things to say. I remember a particular circumstance in my life once where somebody asked me, well, do you want to live? And it was the best question anybody ever asked me. It allowed me the ability to discuss it, talk about it, think about it, and come to a decision. Talk about the details, because just because we don't say them out loud doesn't mean the person isn't thinking about them. And giving somebody permission to have that conversation normalizes the situation. And when you normalize the situation, I think there's great power there to be a part of all kinds of potential healing. That's what I want to say.
I 100% agree. And just to add to that, I think doing that alone, just being open to a conversation, being open to receive that, is you're telling them they're not alone. You're allowing them to see for even just that 30 seconds that they are not alone. I know when I was younger and I was feeling suicidal, I felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders and nobody could help me. Yeah. I didn't know who to turn to. Certainly nobody was paying attention to my suffering because, my family was going through their own stuff. I felt I had to choose whether I could physically handle it or not, me, just myself. And nobody ever asked me, just tell me what's going on. I'm just here to receive. Maybe I can't take this off your shoulders, but I can listen and I can feel with you. I just that small thing can make such a difference.
It goes back to just making sure people know that they are never alone, you know, like, having a safety. They talked about that too a lot in the hospitals. Like it's really important for people that are struggling to have a safe space, and hopefully that safe space includes one person, just one person that can hold that space like Chris is talking about, and to just, check in and to ask those questions. And man, that's the hardest question. When somebody's struggling and they are suicidal and you have to go there and you have to ask, those questions. Nobody wants to go there because none of us are prepared when somebody says, yeah, I am. I'm going to kill myself, like, yeah, I mean, what do you say, how do you talk somebody, out of that? Do you talk somebody out of that? Where are the boundaries there?
I think we're having in some ways, a very 3D conversation about this topic also, because I don't even want to say this.
This is a safe space, my love. Go ahead.
Get it out.
With compassion.
I guess what I want to say is everybody's journey here is different than everybody else's, and everybody's reason for coming and the agreements that they have around everything are different here. And if we take that into account, and we also take into account what I believe, which is there's no such thing as right or wrong, good or bad. I mean, depending on, like, that's gonna.
No judgment.
It's quite a statement. Like, there's no such thing as right or wrong. Well, I mean, there are things that are not. There are manners, right? And there are things that are. How 3D or 5D do we want to be? Kind of like, there's no such thing as right or wrong. Well, on this plane, there is such a thing as right or wrong. I don't think there's such a thing as good or bad. But if you extrapolate that out, right or wrong, like, there are things that are happening that are technically wrong, but they're not, because they're divinely planned. So, where do you draw that line? And I think that's where being open to. I'm not suggesting for a moment that any parent on this planet could walk this line or figure this out, but I don't even want to say this out loud. I mean, Katie, you know what I'm trying to say, don't you?
Well, I think what you're trying to say is that we can't judge anybody for their actions ultimately on this plane, because there is such a higher perspective that is going on. And then you had talked earlier about the shame that is surrounding suicide. And I think that is, it's so hard, because when somebody ends their own life by their own choice, the people around them, there is that shame of, what I should have been able to help. I should have, how could I have let this happen? And all the guilt that goes on with that. But when you really step back and you really are able to see that we don't know what the soul plan was for that person. And we don't know everybody, what was explained to me when I lost my son. And actually, I'll share this because Kat and I had a deep conversation. And Kat is a very gifted channeler with the other side. And this was really, I think, within the first couple of days that I had lost Parker, if I remember, Kat, when we talked. And so you were trying to connect with him, and he was coming in and out because he was still literally transitioning. But you had said that he was so happy and he was so proud of himself, because when he actually ended up, this is the sad tragedy of it all, the whole thing's a tragedy, but when he ended up dying, it was a mistake. He did not intend to die the night that he died. And it was so ironic because the last year, you know, he had been literally wanting to try to actively remove himself from the earth. It was just too much. It was just, he couldn't handle it. And so here I am trying to process, you know, I've lost my son. I don't know, to be honest, everybody, when it first happened, because of his past actions, there was a part I didn't know. I didn't know at that time, did he mean to kill himself in the manner that he did? Was it an accident? It was still, everything was scrambled. You know, the cops were saying, you know, it does appear to be an accident, but I just had that lingering question. So Pat was saying, like, when Parker, that was the human Parker, he was not actively planning to take himself out at that point. And when he got up, so he didn't have any knowledge, right, of that happening. So on that term, it was an accident. But when he got up and he was able to reunite with his higher self, his entire soul, right? Because this is just a fragment of what we're experiencing here in this life. You know, we have an oversoul, we have a higher unity that we come into being once we transition to the other side that's connected with all that is, right? That aspect had said there was a window and this was your time. And so it was like hard to answer that question because she's like, the higher aspect knew that this was ultimately part of the plan, and the impact that Parker would have dying young on so many would be the legacy that he left, and it would end up impacting so many other lives. So in that aspect, it's like, oh, that's kind of beautiful, you know, if you can step away from the pain and the horror of it all. But he was so proud because he said, I was able to achieve, I see now on the other side, I was able to achieve that and not have had to do it. And Kat, maybe you can answer. I don't know if this is, if you're remembering our conversation, but he was saying, like, and not have to do it myself, knowing that how much, you know, that would hurt everybody. I don't know if this is making sense, but I think that's where you were
remember this conversation vividly. I wanted you to say that. That's why I was stumbling so much. Thank you for jumping in. I didn't feel like that was my thing to share or my thing to say. I will, since you asked, I will, what I would say is that there was an agreement before you all came here for that to play out. And that he was, I'm just going to say this the way that it came through, and I apologize if this is offensive to anybody, but this is, I don't want anybody to feel badly, but this is what comes through, and I honor what comes through. So he was very proud of himself, is what I remember. He was proud for keeping what was a difficult task or a difficult, something that took a lot for him to fulfill that contract. And I'll leave all the rest of the personal stuff out of it. But there was a real sense of, okay. This is hard to share because there have been so many communications between us, right? Between the two of you that I have been a part of. I'm grateful to have been a part of. And to talk about one of them and not the full picture is difficult because it provides only a little glimpse and a little piece and just this little straw vision, like tunnel vision of what the experience and the meaning and all this stuff was. And without, and I don't think it's appropriate to share all your personal stuff. I'm not going to. You certainly can. I'm not saying it's not appropriate for you to. It's not. I'm saying I'm not going to do that. That would be you that would do that. So I'm just going to leave it in that space because if I add anything else to that, I would want to add something else to make that make more sense and that make more sense and that make more sense. And without all of the information, I don't think it does it justice. And And I don't want to portray him in any kind of a lesser way, because it's such an amazing, big, wonderful thing that has happened, which sounds like an insane thing to say about your situation. I'm not saying the situation that you're in feels wonderful or is wonderful for you. I'm not certainly saying that. But it is very clearly something that was agreed upon, and that he fulfilled. And
so Kat, and I don't mean to cut you off for two things. We've got Melinda that just joined in, so I want to bring her in here. But before I do that, well, let me bring her in, and then I'll say what I need to say. She's been listening in the background, so let me just bring her in real fast. Hello, Melinda. Can you hear us? Oh,
we can't see you. Hello.
There she is.
Hi.
Hi, Melinda. Is she frozen?
Hello.
And then I'll say what I need to say. She's been listening in the background. Can you hear us? All right, we're having some technical issues with that one, so I'm going to mute her for a moment until she's unfrozen. But I want to say to what both Kat and Katie were talking about, this is not the time to be scared to say those things. I think that's what stops us from accepting that this is divine. And it's divine to the fact that some of us will leave life early, and that we choose to leave life early. It is a divine mission. There is no right or wrong to it. And I am very, very comfortable saying that because I've seen it and I felt it. It's not easy to say that to somebody who's lost somebody, obviously, and it does not make loss easier. However, it doesn't make it any less true. I think the reason that suicide is so hard to talk about is because we think there's something wrong with the people. There's so much guilt surrounding suicidal thoughts and depression that we have essentially victimized them again. You're hurting, so, oh shit, I can't talk to you because something's wrong with you. Because clearly I'm perfect and I never hurt. That's very much how humanity has set this up. There's nothing wrong with them. They've done nothing wrong. They are not, hell, they're not even victims. They're going through their divine journey. And how that ends, how that plays out is how it's meant to play out. And that is not something I take lightly to say at all. And it's not meant as an insult. It's divine.
And it's their journey ultimately. You know, I think we all harbor the guilt, the people that are left behind, you know, but you have to truly at the end of it all know that it's between them and God, you know, and it's, you know, if they make that decision, then, you know, then I don't want to say it's on them. It's not that. It's just that, yeah. I mean, sometimes people that, like that professional said, they just are so backed into a corner and they just want the pain to end. And every time that I think of, you know, the sadness, the whatever the human emotions are, I just try to say, but there's no more suffering. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, if you can step back, most people that do and choose to end their life, there's a tremendous amount of suffering that has led up to that, you know? And I know it sounds cliche to say, you know, there's no more pain, you know, like that's supposed to just make everything better here on earth. You know, we still have to deal with that in a human way, but I just wanted to add that to your point, Chris.
Absolutely. And thank you. I feel no shame over having felt like that. And I shared it on my blog yesterday. I slept with a knife under my pillow for probably a couple of years because the situation I was going through with my mother was just so painful. I needed the reminder that I could end it. I really did. I needed to know that if it got too bad, I could stop. Now, I never did. But something about it was comforting. It didn't mean that something was wrong with me. It didn't mean that I was weak or a quitter or going to hell or any of the other 1,000 things that we have told ourselves. I was having a very human reaction to the mission that I was on, to the life path that I was on. And there's nothing wrong with that.
There isn't anything wrong with that. I too experienced that as a kid. I think kids are particularly susceptible because their worlds are so insular. They don't have a bigger picture yet.
They live so in the moment. Yeah. And their emotions, especially in the teenage years, are just unknown to them. They don't have a language for, what's happening in their body. So it's hard for them to communicate their feelings, and they just tend to be reactionary. And I'm not, I'm not saying this in a judgmental way. I'm trying not to, I guess. But yeah, I agree. My heart and my prayers go out to your friend, Chris, and that sweet little baby girl, because 13 it's a tough age,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the great thing about her doing this now is that there are people out there like this group, like other groups, that are ready to jump in, because what Spirit is telling me about this and about a lot of the children that are facing this problem is they're ready to find themselves at such a young age now. They're ready to find themselves on a divine level in a way that we weren't at their age. We didn't have to. That is incredible challenge to have to find yourself at 13. That's huge to think about that, but they're ready for it. They need to go through that for their divine mission. So the fact that this type of thing is happening is heartbreaking, but we're here to jump into it. Like, we need to lean into it and be there for each other and be there for these kids that are here on earth specifically to go through this stuff so that they can find themselves and be self-aware at a much younger age than the generations before them. They feel more. They are more. And we as adults have to help them realize that there's nothing wrong with that it is a divine journey and that they're not alone.
I don't think they're feeling more. I think that their circumstances are different. Right?
I don't know.
I think they're more empathetic than we were. I think they're more connected. I think the veil is thinner for them than it was for a lot of children. Certainly not all. Some are born very, very connected.
I mean, yeah, I would agree. I like this. I would agree that they've come in at a time of transition where even outside of the veil, there's more ease of access to what's beyond the veil within our culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I just wanted to pop in on that note. I was talking with a couple of Parker's friends recently, so they're 19 now, and that they were saying, you have to understand that for us, there are no limits. Everything that you can imagine is at your fingertips now with, the amount of information out there. And so, half of what makes us want to wake up tomorrow and to continue through life is that sense of adventure and that sense of, like, what's going to happen? And, wow, maybe I'll get. But I thought when they were saying that, I'm like, wow, that would put a downer in a way on your life, because you're kind of like, what's the, like, I can just look up anything. I can, like, see anything. I don't know if I'm communicating kind of like what their point was, but I thought that's a interesting place to be, and then dealing with, all the emotions and things that come up. Anyways, Kat, I'm sorry. That made me think when you said that.
Yeah, no, I was just feeling into something. I think it's a really interesting point. I mean, the souls that have chosen to come in this generation are this is true about every time, but I want to say in a time like no other. The separation, while there is no separation, right? But the feeling of separation, not just because of what happened in 2020, but also, they're having to teach social interaction in our schools and how to talk to people for the first time ever, because they don't. They spend all their time like this, even when they're with each other, right? That's their means of communication now, and there's great reason for it. There's this facilitation of shift from what was to what's next, and technology is a huge part of that, and bringing new possibility into this plane is a big part of that as well. That separation facilitates societal changes that allow freedoms in ways that didn't exist before with regard to their choices. But, there's always a flip side to that, and so it's interesting to watch them navigate that, and to watch the other people that aren't a part of that generation judging what's coming.
Yeah.
But it's just, I think, the topic that we're discussing, it makes them particularly vulnerable because there is that feeling of separation. That ends up separation and artificial, just artifice everywhere. You can't even tell what anybody looks like. Everything's artificial. Everything's either somebody had surgery, or they've got filters all over the place, or, they show up as who they are not. And good God, I can't even imagine what that's like to deal with as a kid.
And I just want to add to your point about communication is, Parker would say over and over again, I don't want to be a burden to people, because nobody wants to have a downer friend. We all act like we're compassionate and like, oh yeah, if we saw somebody struggling, we would reach out, but not really. Most of us are like, I got my own stuff to deal with. And so you find that you put on a fake smile and a happy face when you communicate, and then you go cry yourself to sleep every night, with that sense of aloneness and separation. And social media, like you're saying, everybody's perfect, and and then you are honest too much with people, and then they push you away. They're like, ooh, I just don't have the energy to deal with that right now. That's just deep, and that person's just raw and heavy, and I don't want to be brought down, and so I think, we talked a lot about, the act of suicide, but for those people that are feeling suicidal and contemplating, maybe, ending things. There was this one public service commercial. I don't know if anybody remembers it, and I don't remember exactly how the conversation went in the commercial, but I thought it was just so beautiful, because it showed two young people kind of sitting at separate ends of the couch. You could tell they were friends, but the one was kind of looking down and away, and then the other one was kind of looking down and away, like they weren't connecting. Right. And so finally the one looked at the other and said, how are you doing? How have things been going? And just that engagement, it was about helping people that are struggling, and it was about just opening up that conversation in that space. And even just sometimes just the communication of just checking in with somebody, even if that they're not doing well. Clearly the other person wasn't doing well, and the girl was debating on, what do I say, how much do I get involved? But it just lit the other person's face up to know that there was, again, that safe space, that they weren't alone. There was, the isolation was bridged, that gap was bridged. And I know we're getting close to the end. I just want to make sure I add in one more point is another thing that I learned through my experiences was I don't know what, like the healthcare professionals try to explain is if you are dealing with a situation where somebody, is contemplating suicide, it's really important to delineate between, are you thinking things are hopeless and, thinking about suicide, or do you have an actual plan? And I don't know why, there's like a big difference there, but they kept drilling that into my head.
Because that tells you where on the spectrum they are and how.
Yeah. And if they are, if they have thought about a plan, like Kat's saying, like that's when you're like code red, like that's, and I'm not saying if they're just thinking about suicide, that's not code red. But yeah, they just kept making that point of, if somebody has already thought through a plan, you probably want to get them to a hospital. You want to get them some help. And you don't want to wait, So I just want to make sure I share that.
All right, Steph, you've got some young kids. How do they deal with all of it? I mean, your children clearly seem awake and aware of themselves, but that can actually make it a lot harder.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you saw it, but I got super emotional. This has been a tough one.
Oh, honey, you're going to make me start crying.
Callie's been very open about her journey. And as an almost 18-year-old who is just supremely consciously aware of herself and of others and empathic, she has struggled. What's been really big and alive in my field through this whole conversation is that, not to say that all of this conversation is not like, oh my God, it's so needed, so incredibly needed. And there's more. There's so much more we could talk about. And my mind keeps going to DNA. My mind keeps going to the slipping away that we have experienced as humans on this journey from generation to generation. We're caring for ourselves and feeding ourselves properly, spirit, mind, and body. Those practices have fallen away and begun to be replaced with programming and all kinds of stuff that just makes us so sick, spirit, mind, and body. And how can we as humans continue this way? We can't. That's why we're here talking about it right now. Because we can't keep doing this. We can't keep shoving to the back burner the practices and conversations that bring energy front and center and help people understand how to process it, when, why, what it looks like, being held in a community of support where we can openly discuss all of this. And when you ask about Callie, it makes me think of, man, Katie, what you have been through with Parker. I can't even begin to imagine. But what I do understand, what I have experienced is, for me, scary. Not in a things are ending kind of way, but in that like helpless, what the fuck am I going to do kind of way.
And feeling alone. Yeah.
And it was a phone call that I got from the counselor at school. Callie was cutting. She's cutting herself. And I called her hypnotherapist. She already had, even as a young child, began to express this dissonance and this unrest and this frustration that I, as a parent, being so out of tune at that time and still plugged into the matrix and unfamiliar with my own being, had no idea how to cope with, no idea what to do with. And so it was my immediate reach out for help to this beautiful human who was able to ask some really good questions and also sort of steer me in the way of, don't freak out. She's having a journey. She's expressing something here. We'll begin as we start this conversation to understand more deeply what it is. Because this isn't the issue. It's actually something else. And that journey with her started.
Hmm.
And that was one of those little like notches, I guess, in my spiritual awakening of just conscious awareness of why people do the things they do and how it is called in through soul contracts and deeper, bigger, higher echelon views of what it really means to be here in this human experience.
And ancestral patterns, like you brought up with the DNA, that unfortunately you might not even be aware of, that you consciously brought in, 300 years plus worth of, a certain lineage of problems. And, the statistics now are, 1 in 4 people have a form of mental illness. And when you think about a typical family as a family of 4, mental illness has touched all of us. And, we all joke, oh yeah, I got the crazy uncle or, something like that. But how can it not become a part of the DNA structure, when it's such a prevalent problem? And, even with these mass, murders and shootings and, the craziness that goes on, most of the time when they take the person that does this, these acts, they have, unfortunately, a form of mental illness that hasn't been treated. And so it's like, if we focus more on, and mental illness, like that word needs to be changed, because at this point, it's like we all have anxiety. We all have a little bit of depression. I mean, I don't know anybody and I know a lot of people that, especially with the events and the transformation of the last year, that have not said, yeah, it's been overwhelming. Yeah, I felt alone and depressed. So it's like, I don't know, like we need to change that mental illness, because it's like you're saying, Stephanie, it's unfortunately a part of who we are now. So how do we, deal with that? And I just want to add one thing too, that you touched on about Callie and her great empathic ability. Because I think that, as I study human design, as everybody knows, and human design is the evolution of the human being as a species, and going down to our individual DNA activations, and the predictions as we continue to evolve as human species is that the future generations are going to be more empathic. That is the turning point. That is the new focus. We are going from the Industrial Revolution that we've been in for the last couple hundred years, these huge advancements in technology and, the mental aspect. And we are shifting right now. As you can see, 2020 has begun this shift, and, all these, the great age of Aquarius is we're shifting into a, more empathic way of communicating with humans, of communicating, like Chris was saying, the veil being thin, and the unity consciousness. And I remember honey, I'm so sorry about the cutting. And I could not, that was one thing I just could not wrap my head around. How could we'll have to talk. But just that feeling of overwhelm and needing to release. They need to release it. And I had taken Parker. Everybody knows I am a Qigong instructor, and I have great respect for, I call him, my Qigong master, but, he's just a man that was raised on the mountaintops of China by a Taoist, priest, and learned a lot about energy work, and then came over to the States and got a PhD in molecular genetics. So, brilliant man. I have a lot of respect and admiration from him. And, I had taken Parker in at one point to see him, and, he does it. His medicine is he analyzes the energy. And he looked at Parker, and I'm leaning in, please, God, give me some kind of answer. And he said, Parker, your energy is strong. What you're doing is you are empathically taking on the weight of the world, the weight of everybody you're around. He said, when you are in a room with your friends, or you're, at a party or something, or at school, he goes, I guarantee when people leave your presence, they feel better. You feel worse, they feel better. So you're your challenge is you have this open filter, and I think we're going to see more and more generations having more and more of an open filter. You know, that's the direction we're going. But these poor kids right now that are stuck, just like our generation, you know, I always marveled at the fact that, you know, well, Chris and Steph, you're young. I don't know, Kat and I are the same age, but you know, like I was like, we're the only generation that really knows what it's like to not have computers. I mean, remember, Kat, like when we grew up, you know, like, and so, you know, that's a huge shift that we've had to go through as a generation. Well, the generation that is now coming up and, you know, future generations is the empathicness. And what do you do with that when you're first learning? You know, people make fun of me and Kat because we're not, you know, maybe is technology, you know, efficient as the rest of them. But it's because we've had to juggle, you know, both of those balls as the, you know, humanness evolves. And so I guess I just want to, I feel like this is coming from Parker to Callie, but yeah, like if there's any way that she can create boundaries, energetic boundaries, and that she can learn to ground that energy that she's processing and to know, to have that check-in, to go, wait, step back. Is this your stuff? Is this my stuff I'm processing, or is this somebody else's stuff? And I think that even taking that out of the teenage context, like when we're talking about suicide being up so much, you know, this unbelievable percentage, a lot of us are not even aware that we are taking on the fear of the world, you know, everything that happened. I remember, just because I'm energetically sensitive, you know, and I lost my son January of 2020, and, you know, like literally right as COVID was coming, and I was so in a vulnerable state. I literally could feel, I'm sure a lot of you too, I could feel at that time, you know, it was really bad in China and Europe and making its way over to the US. I could feel it coming. I could feel this layer of fear and angst and everything that was associated with COVID outside of the, you know, physical symptoms coming, you know, just moving like through the world. So people are taking this stuff in energetically, and they don't have a way. Steph, you said it brilliantly. Like, we need to get back to, you know, our ancestral connection to what is the divine plan, to what is greater than all of us, to be able to connect in and trust, you know, that there is something that makes sense of all of this. This is patterns. This is going as planned. And how do we adapt? How do we ground? How do we deal with the energy? How do we know, you know, when to take it on, and how to, you know, separate it when it's too much? Because when it becomes too much, that's when we want to check out.
I really think it starts with just what we did here, just hearing each other's stories, putting it out on the table. Melinda sharing her story in the group, several other people sharing their stories. Nobody's alone in this. There's nothing wrong with having these experiences. There's nothing wrong with getting to that point in your life. And there's honestly nothing wrong if you have taken your life. It's not right or wrong. And if we can talk about it, if we can be open-hearted and just receive, using that wonderful empathy that we are now able to use in abundance, what couldn't we change about this? And how could we not make an impact if we're willing to just receive each other's stories from heart?
Without judgment.
Yeah, just listen. Just be there. There's nothing wrong with what they're telling you, and it's not a reflection on you in any way, shape, or form, on any of us. We're such proud creatures in so many ways, to our detriment, that we're almost unwilling to even see our own flaws, or, God forbid, let anybody else see them.
Suffer in silence.
Suffer in silence. No more.
No more.
I am not a fan
more.
of it. Let's just throw that thing out. It's not working. We tried it.
Throw that thing out. It's
Yeah. We spent a couple thousand years on that. Let's call that one a good trial and let's move along.
The first duty of love is to listen.
Absolutely right.
Beautiful, Melinda. I don't know if I could find a better way to bring this to close. I feel like what you just said in its full glory, Chris, was beautiful. With that, we're going to close the show for today. Thanks to all of you for joining in and having this conversation. This is where it starts. This is where the healing comes forward through the movement of this energy, the exploration, understanding, and conversation. So again, thank you for being with us today. Join us every Sunday right here live on Facebook, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern.
I haven't put the banner up at the bottom for you. I'm just saying.
I started to get lost in my eyes and went right down there. Thanks, you guys, so much for watching. We'll catch you next time.